through, but otherwise we might get started. So this week's session of Base Camp, or Back to Base, is all around how to actually build a development plan. So it's going to be super practical, and it would be amazing if any of you could share through an example of when you've had to do this before, or if you would like to start to create one and what that might look like. So we'd really like to sort of work through any live examples that you have as well. But obviously we have a practical one already prepared and have some great questions to ask you off the back of that. So we'll move into our video now. So hopefully all is good. You can hear.
Nicole is the MD of a small company with 50 staff. She has several direct reports, which also includes the sales team. Of the 4 sales staff, Gavin constantly achieves or over-exceeds his revenue targets, whilst the other 3 is a little bit more inconsistent. To grow the company and increase revenue, Nicole is considering creating a sales manager role and promoting Gavin into it. But after having an informal chat with some of the sales team and the support team, they all perceive Gavin to be a bit abrupt. He's always in a rush, doesn't appear to listen to the ideas of others, and is very quick to make decisions. Nicole still wants to promote Gavin. However, she feels Gavin needs to build some better relationships with other sales team members before the promotion. Nicole asks Gavin and the sales team to complete their PI behavioural assessment. Based on Gavin's captain profile, the feedback from the staff seems valid. In order for Gavin to develop into the sales manager role, Nicole has put together a development plan for how Gavin can improve the existing relationships and build trust amongst the team. If he can demonstrate his ability to make the required changes, he will be reconsidered for the role again.
All right. So now that we've seen that, we're actually already aware of what the profile is. It was already given to us. So we won't start off with that question. Normally we test your knowledge based on what you think the profile is. But it's already gone through. Gavin is a captain in this scenario. So he's got a really high A. His dominance is quite strong. He's got a high B, so his extroversion is quite social. That's high as well. He's got a lower C and a high D as well, so higher than his C drive. But I'm keen to ask if anyone. So obviously this job profile has already been done. The orange boxes that sit in the background of his behavioural profile. Can anyone sort of take a stab, a guess at what that profile might look like based on any profiles you might have seen in the past, the job profile? So that profile being high A, high B, low C, and a slightly higher D.
Do you mean what is Gavin's profile, or what is the profile for the job?
Sorry, what is the job profile?
Yeah.
So
which is like a zigzag. If you look at it, it's kind of a zigzag. So anyone who remembers training, low A, high B, low C, high D, zigzag.
Could it be a strategist?
Good attempt, because it's got a lot of commonality with a strategist. A strategist would have a higher A though. So strategists are A over B, but good thinking, because they do have that low C, high D. So, but because of this higher B drive, this will sit in the social profiles. I'll give you that little hint. So it'll probably have a hexagon background. Anyone else want to take a stab at it?
Altruist.
Hey, very good, Peter. Gold star. It is an altruist. Very good.
Could be a persuader and a controller as well, if that's right, Alicia.
No, it's too high in the B drive for a controller. So when your B drive is higher, you can't have by default, it's a social profile, because the highest drive is B. But a controller, if you literally put the B drive right smack bang under the A, it'll be a controller. So it's really close. It'll be in a suburb in parallel too, which is quite common for sales managers. We often see controller type of patterns. This type of sales manager job is clearly just highlighting that they probably have to spend quite a lot of time meeting new people. It'll have more of a social element to it. Some sales manager roles don't, but in this instance, there is a social drive for the role.
So what are some of the differences between his profile and that job target? Alicia's just covered, but someone want to summarise it? Which are a couple of factors that are a bit different? You can type it in the chat box if you like.
And then for those who want extra points, are we giving out extra points? Double points today, Shannon? We've got double points going on. What factor combinations are misaligned? We've got A and D from Eamon in terms of which factors are a little bit off. Yes, absolutely. The D is a lot lower in Gavin's profile, and his A is much higher. So that will start to impact the risk profile of how he feels about risk compared to the risk profile of the job, which is really interesting. I want to see if anybody else can identify. There's one other factor combination that's quite different from Gavin versus the job. Anyone want to take a stab at it?
Can't see anyone typing, so they might be stumped by your question.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, Pia, good attempt with the B and C. The B and C is really nicely aligned in terms of Gavin is B over C, so the B is high, the C is low. That would make him what we call quick to connect, and the role is quick to connect. Probably that's what makes him such a great salesperson in that scenario. So that's a really good observation. The factor combination that's a little bit different from Gavin versus the role. If you have a look at Gavin is A over B. So his A is actually higher than his B. So he's going to be quite task orientated. It doesn't cross the midpoint, but it's definitely A is higher than the B on the high side. So we'd still call him task orientated. But if you have a look at the orange bars, it's actually a B over A role. So it's more people orientated. And again, probably connecting to a little bit of the feedback that's happening in our scenario as well. So the A and the B versus B over A factor combination is a little bit misaligned between Gavin and the role.
Mm-hmm. So that would probably be why he's more direct and he's really focused, heads down, get the work done, as opposed to taking that collaborative, people-focused view, which is what they wanted. And also the A and C is well, actually, no, I'm going to read the answer already. A and C is the factor that's got the widest combination. So he's really going to be highly independent. He wants to move fast. He's very proactive and decisive, and will thrive under pressure, which is different to the way that the job profile's actually been profiled.
And just to let everybody know too, so what I've done in the chat is I have put down the scenario recap, just some verbiage around the scenario. So for those of you, the videos are quite quick. Our wonderful video editor, can only have so much time to build our awesome animations, so we keep them quite quick. But Alexia and Shannon were able to type up that scenario for you. So feel free to click on that in the chat, and then you can reread the situation that we talked through as Shannon goes through and starts to ask you some extra questions.
All right. Might move on then from that that profile. So development plans. As a leader or a manager, your role is really to inspire and initiate ideas and give constructive feedback and help individuals in your team and people that you work with really grow under the guidance that you give. We use this framework to sort of help us guide and design to create a development plan. when I'm talking about a development plan in this context, it's not necessarily a performance management plan. It's more around how we can uplift their development more so than a process to follow around a performance-based, a scenario specifically. Although they do interlink a little bit. This is very much on the development plan. So we, in the top left quadrant, we really focus around identifying what their career goals might be, their desired skills, and focusing on the future. So where do they really want to be? And then we have a conversation around their gaps, and we talk through and identify what are the steps that they need to actually develop in order to address any of the gaps that they might have between their current state and the future state that they wish to be in, a future role that they wish to grow into. What knowledge and skills might there be, or any capabilities that they might need to improve on. So we've addressed through the future state. Now we talk through the gaps, and then we talk about action. And this is it's very good to do this, obviously, very much in consultation with the person who's doing it. The worst thing you can do as a manager is go off and design a development plan on your own, and then come back and just showcase it to the individual. It needs to be designed by the person for them to really be on board and happy to be a part of this development. That'll be more meaningful for them. So then we move into actually setting some specific actions. Obviously, otherwise it's just words on a page, and that's not going to go anywhere. So we work through specific actions, and we determine what actions need to be taken in order to achieve the goals that you've set. It's really important to set specific timelines and milestones around that, so you never leave actions with an undetermined time frame, because then things tend to drag out. And then you just talk about if there's any support that's needed. So does the individual, want some additional assistance from you? So it's time to not make any assumptions and really be able to allow for a two-way dialogue to take place. And then lastly, we look at reviewing the document. So you make sure that you have progress checkpoints in place, that you can talk through any improvements and any areas of opportunity as well that might need to be taken into account. So I'm keen to ask, has anyone actually had to host a conversation like this before? Or is anyone going to go into that kind of conversation? Or if you haven't actually done it, do you have, are you comfortable sharing how you think you might approach this conversation with a team member or a person you're managing?
Yeah, so Shannon, it's Fred. So from our business perspective, obviously our objective is to use the tools that we get from the staff doing their PIs to further develop them. So basically take some of the information and guidance we get from the PI they do to then help them focus on development areas in specific roles. Mm. So our objective at Krona is to specifically utilize all that information from the PI, and then on a step-by-step basis, try and develop our staff to address some of the shortcomings they may have in certain areas.
Mm. And do you do that at the moment? Your process, do you actually do that in consultation with the individual, or how's your approach?
Yeah, so up to now we've got a PDA system in place where I discuss their results, behavior. There's a behavior component that forms part of it that we discuss with them on an annual basis and a half-yearly basis. So basically a half year to just align on where they are with their targets mid-year. And obviously if there are any specific areas where they're going off track, to basically just realign.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can help manage those expectations.
Yep.
Sharing, Fred. Has anyone, I suppose another way I want to ask this question is, has anyone actually experienced a developmental conversation, whether it's a structured one like what Fred was talking through, or just an ad hoc one, where they've actually, like, what were some of the things that the manager might have said to you that, you know, you really resonated with you, or you think that they did it really, you know, you took all the feedback on board and it was a really positive experience?
Hi, Alicia. Hi, Shannon. Abdul here. I was talking, it was on mute, sorry. Okay, so I did have similar conversation with my team members. In December and January, when we were reviewing their IPPs, so I discussed with them to add an item for them, to select an item where they can do self-improvement, where they can see themselves, where they can improve. And the results were impressively positive. Okay. Not with all of them, so I can be honest. One of them, I had to be to lead him to where to express his opinion and where he can improve, because I was seeing where he needs to improve, but I wanted him to take that decision. But the others I left, and that was in reference to their assessment results.
Yeah.
That's why I've dealt with that specific individual in the way I discussed it with him. So this is what I wanted to share with you.
Yeah, no, great. That's a great example, Abdul. So I think you're kind of just describing a theory based on directive versus appreciative inquiry. So when someone actually is open and they're exploring and they're open with the areas that they want to develop, and they're almost they're sharing it rather than you directing to them what they need to do, they're much more receptive of actually.
That is correct, 100%.
Yeah, so it's a great example you shared there. So the way we like to actually host the conversation is following the GROW model. So that model itself is probably not unfamiliar, at least with the acronym. So GROW stands for the goal. So G is goal, and it's about establishing the goal that they're wanting to achieve first, right? You need to have a direction that you're heading in. And then what impact? So some of the questions that you can ask to help them define the goal is, what impact do you want to have? Will you have? And explore that a little bit with them. What are the skills, knowledge, and experience that you actually want to gain? So these are some open, appreciative-based questions that will help define what that goal might be in the development plan. Then you move on to R, which is reality. So that's actually establishing what the current worldview is and the current situation is now, today, without having done it. So asking questions: how important is this goal to you, and why? How will it actually help? How will achieving this goal impact your career and life? And this is a really important part of the model, because sometimes in reality there can be a bit of a misalignment between an individual's sort of ambitions and their abilities, right? And sometimes we need to have much more of a constructive conversation with them to help maybe paint the picture a little bit clearer around where the gaps are for them. Third, we move into options. So for options, what are the different choices that they actually have available for them to select from? So obviously you're only working within your company, within your framework, and you know what the kinds of opportunities and experiences that you have in order to offer them. So what could you do to achieve your goal? That's the question you would ask them, right? There's very much, you're not telling them what they need to do. Career is often about us deciding where we want to go and us sort of driving that forward. So some questions that you can ask them to help guide that are, what steps could you take on your own to get there? This will help the person sort of reflect and think about, okay, what might I want to do and what could I do next? And then lastly is the will. So W for will. Agree to the action, establish what and how to achieve the action. So actually setting it, that's the most important part of the plan and can sometimes be missed because you've just had a great conversation and you haven't actually put any timeframes and commitment around it. The actions are what actions and steps will you take and who will you actually talk to? Where will you go to get that exposure and experience? This is a great framework to use when actually discussing development plans or designing them. Anyone can do this. You could even go and do this offline just for yourself and then take that model to your manager and see what their thoughts are. Might pause on this. Does anyone have any reflections or thoughts on this?
Are there any organisations that use the GROW model within their organisation? It's a very common framework. If you've done an MBA, they'll teach this framework. It was developed by Sir John Whitmore back in the 70s. Is there anybody out there that uses GROW?
Yeah, we've actually used this similar framework before when I was still in operations back in my younger days, so to speak.
Very good. And it's an interesting framework, the GROW framework, because whilst it was developed for coaching as its fundamental purpose, I'll put a link in the chat on the book. It's one of the great books for those of you who want to have more of a coaching style with staff. But it's a great framework because we can use the exact same structure when we're having development conversations, which can be different from a coaching conversation. There's a little bit of parallel, but you can see it's quite practical. Even when I've worked with CEOs on structuring conversations, you might even use the GROW model. When I used to do email communication strategies for CEOs that were going out to the whole business, we would use GROW, and it would sit underneath the communication that we were writing. No one knew that. It's not like you write G goal, our goal is, but we would use that framework to really actually, if you think about it, well, what's the goal? What do we want to achieve? Almost what's the purpose? Where are we at right now? What are the options that are available to us? And then what are we going to commit to? It's actually a fantastic framework to use when you're giving feedback, when you're writing emails, when you're thinking about communication strategy. So through our programs that we'll run, they'll often will reference this very, very famous framework.
Okay. Well, if there's no sort of other thoughts on that particular content, I'll just open it up for some questions. Thought we'd keep it a little bit more simple. Development plans and performance plans and management of that aspect of people can be quite complex, and you can really, tailor it to their profile so that it can land really effectively with individuals. But that, is each person is quite unique. So we won't go into all of the details. But yeah, any questions, and it doesn't have to be just to do with today's session. It can be with some of the other space camps that we've run.
I think that's a no questions.
That's a no question. So,
which is unusual. Normally we have lots on the chat on questions. So there you go. We must have answered all of them, Shannon. There you go. You did such a good job. There are no questions.
Awesome. Well, as Alicia said, we're going to actually be wrapping all of the recordings that we've done for the base camps for the last month into one tidy email, and we'll be distributing that, if not this week, probably mid next week. So any questions off the back of that, let us know.
And also when you get that email, which will come probably from me, if there's any particular topics that you want explored, please let us know, because we will do another Basecamp round going in probably into September. So we're looking to do another series, but we're obviously open to the feedback from everybody. We've done these scenarios based on some pretty popular topics, but very happy to take feedback from all of you wonderful people that are our clients. So we've got one question from Peter. Is an Ultrist a typical sales manager profile? So great question. So we would see an Ultrist style typically in more of a retail sales environment, probably not enterprise or commercial or technical sales, but in service-based sales roles. So we do work with a very large retailer, like a luxury retailer, and an Ultrist would be a fairly common pattern for the sales manager position for this reason. And we also see Ultrist do very well in account management in larger businesses. So if you think about an Ultrist, so they've got that sort of this job mapping had a midline A, so they'll be independent but also collaborative. They're socially driven, so they want to work with and through people to get their job done. They're quick to connect. They're quite fast moving. They're proactive, so they still want to get that job done. But where they're good at sales management is that high formality. So we know that sales management is often about tracking the details, what's in the CRM, what's the numbers. We need a sales manager who can have more formality than our typical salespeople who might not have that formality, who are a bit more flexible and selling the things that don't exist. The sales manager makes sure those systems and structures are in place. So an Ultrist pattern works well in those type of environments. And this is why often people say to us, well, can't you just give us the standard profile for a sales manager? I'm like, no, because this works in a very consultative, the business comes into a store, retail sales management. This wouldn't work in a SaaS-based hyper-growth fast business. It wouldn't work in enterprise IT selling. It wouldn't work in, I don't know, Eamon came from like advertised marketing. It might work in some environments and it might not work in others. There's no such thing as one job profile to rule them all. So it's a Lord of the Rings reference there. See, I got out of the Star Trek reference and I went to Lord of the Rings today. So yes, just to give you that context, and hence why we really do encourage you to profile your roles in your business and take the job assessment, because whilst we can recommend, like based on what we see, we work across 17 different industries. We're very privileged that we get to work across so many different industries, and we can share with you case studies and examples, but the reality is your business is unique to you. So we really want to make sure that you've profiled all the roles in your business.
And to our remote team who are really in the midst of understanding the importance of job profiling, I hope that you all frantically writing notes there based on what Alicia just shared, because that was gold.
Yeah. And hence when you're profiling roles with your clients, and we can't standardize those things for you. It's not the right thing to do. We can get close, but we wouldn't be close enough. And if we're then going to base lots of decisions around it, we would be doing a disservice to the people involved, put it that way, because we'd be making inaccurate decisions. Oh, there you go, Harvey, as an Ultrist. More on account management. Yeah, cool, very good. Yeah, we because Ultrists are quite service orientated. So I'd always say you turn up with, how can I help you? So you won't almost feel like you're selling. It more just feels like you're providing a great service. And to give you that extra piece of PI knowledge, in our PI design wheel, if those of you who use design in the tool, and we've got our 4 quadrants of innovation and agility, results and discipline, round to process and precision, and up into teamwork. You'll see an Ultrist, because of their zigzag pattern, they almost sit right in the middle because of their zigzag. But from where will they probably magnetize to? It'll be up in that teamwork and customer experience, because they're people orientated, they're service driven. So they'll be well suited in customer facing roles, dealing with people on a regular basis. So that's sort of the superpower of the altruist. Maybe we should have done a whole episode on the altruist. I do love them.
Well, you're clearly in the right role, Harvey. So
yeah, very good. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll keep you to time. So thank you. We'll get your feedback at some point in time. Feel free to always pop us an email. We love to hear from you. You can never talk too much to us as a group of talkers and social profiles. So, yeah, and good to see a few new faces on the call today as well.
Sorry, Alyssa, before we go, I've got a question for Shannon. Using the GROW framework, right? What are some of the questions that we could ask Gavin?
Yeah, the questions that we went through were some of the things around what kind of impact that they're wanting to actually have. And this is where it would be interesting to look at their profile as well, because you might find, and Alicia, throw in, you might find dominant people might want to have a larger impact. So that could also be a way that you're framing some of the questions that you're asking. But other things is, what sort of skills and knowledge do they want to gain? What are the gaps that they need to actually cover from a skills or competency level in order to gain that? How important is the goal to them? If it's not important to them, they might not actually be bothered to deliver on it or want to achieve it. Asking how will it actually impact them in their career by setting that goal. It's really open-ended things to get them thinking about, why is this important? What do I need to do? And am I really driven to achieve it? Yeah.
Was your question more around, based on his differences between his role, how we would tailor his development plan? Is that kind of more what you meant, or?
Yeah, because looking at his profile, and considering that he's going to be a leader, so it was more about his roles. The general questions are already there, but I was thinking more of questions surrounding his role.
And that's a really interesting point you make. So what you would do in the tool is, if that was live for you, is if you actually went into his profile and clicked on the coaching guide, what that would do is it'd bring up some differences between his A drive, which is where that disconnect is. So how can he be more, it'll have questions along the lines of, Peter, how can you consider others' opinions before sharing yours first? How can you allow others to provide input before you make a decision? So there'll be a range of coaching questions in there. The same will be for his formality. So his formality drive, yes, he had the corporate hook, but it wasn't as structured as the role. So again, those coaching questions, because it'll identify the misalignment, will be things around what systems and processes do you have in place to ensure there are no errors in your work, or who could you delegate to within the team to support you with the details within your role. So there'll be some guidelines, typically about 3 questions the PI will give you. I always say we're smarter than the tool, though. So knowing that in the context is that his A is too high and his D is too low, going to our tools and going, well, what does this mean in the context? So, and then being able to give him a little bit of feedback on that, but also going, now Lexia shared the development chart on one of our base camps. And again, you might have a look at his high A drive on his development chart that he's got, and it will say some of his cautions that he might be a bit abrasive. Again, there's some things that we might be able to, again, we're not going to just cut and paste and put it in his development plan, but we're going to use that language to help guide us in our conversation and maybe even intertwining it with our GROW conversation. So that's where I would say you're kind of going to leverage a few things at the same time. And really you're going to get very, very close to having an incredibly accurate conversation, instead of saying, I don't think you connect quickly enough with your clients, which would be so far away from the truth, because that's actually like a really big part of who he is. He's a quick to connect person. So Does that help a little bit more,
Yeah.
referencing those few tools?
Yeah, it helped a lot, Alicia. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great. But great question, because I think that's often the challenge to go, okay, well, I can see the misalignment, but what do I do with that? So again, I'd encourage you again, the power of job profiling. Once you've got a job profile attached to a person, you can click on that coaching guide, and that will give you, again, it'll only be 3 or so questions in each factor, but again, it's just guiding you. It's likely to go in that direction.
Yep, cool. Thank you.
Very good. Great question. Good way to finish this up. So thank you. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We will wrap up and we'll share it with you. And we look forward to talking to you all very, very soon.